I'm joined now by the Democratic nominee for governor in New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
So we have a major story that's broken right now. At the request of your Republican opponent, Jack Ciattarelli's operatives, the Trump administration has released your unredacted personal military records to his campaign. So first off, can you speak specifically about what kind of information was released to your Republican opponent's campaign, and just this broader reaction here to the idea of any political opponent of this administration having their information be used as a cudgel against them?
Yes. So we're still piecing together exactly what happened and how it happened. But here's what we know. My primary was June 10th. So on June 9th, a person associated with the Ciattarelli campaign, he'd been vetted to be Ciattarelli's lieutenant governor, FOIA'd my private military records with a lot of personal information, like social security numbers, et cetera. So he was told no, that he'd have to get my permission for that release.
Right.
After I won the next day, the primary, shortly after that, he made a phone call. And he spoke to somebody who was a, quote, real helpful person. So that real helpful person and that phone call led to him illegally getting my records released to him. After he had been told, after he'd been denied, he suddenly makes this phone call and is able to get all of this information. And he even himself called this shocking and disgusting that he had gotten it because he'd seen all of his social security numbers. My parents' information was on there. So I think some of it had been stamped with stuff like PII, personally identified fiable information not to be released, etc. And lest you think that, this might have some reasonable explanation, as you go into this, because the National Archives sent me a letter about this breach, and so we then went into exactly what happened. You're supposed to get a signature from the person whose information is for release. They didn't do that. You're supposed to have a social security number. Evidently, this guy or girl, the real nice person, utilizes the VA database, a database that you or I couldn't get access to, gets access to that because they're part of the archives, gets my social security number, then utilizes that to get access to all of my information. They're supposed to notify the Navy. They didn't do that. So all of these breaches occurred because they were just really illegally giving out my information. And so it's pretty shocking that the Trump administration can weaponize information like this, that at the behest of Jack Ciattarelli and his campaign, they can, they're working together to do this. And then it's also, I think, more concerning that Jack Ciattarelli, who wants to be governor of New Jersey, is getting access to this information. And then the team is just disseminating it despite knowing that they shouldn't have it. And that it could really, I tell people we run really knockdown, drag out fights here in New Jersey, and I'm up for that. I jokingly say, I'm going to fight tooth and nail to serve the people of New Jersey, right? But to try to damage someone and my parents are 80 years old, and now I'm worried about their credit, and they're, I don't think they're going to protect it. I've got to figure that out. I got to figure out our credit. It's really beyond the pale.
Yeah, and so is this the kind of situation where if they ultimately did have any appetite whatsoever to figure out who did it, that there would be some marker, some method to be able to figure out who leaked this information? Is it really just a question of whether the administration itself has the appetite to do so, which of course would lend itself to reason that if it's somebody who's supplying information to a Republican candidate, that of course they're not going to have any appetite to do so, and so that's just it.
So we have put out a legal letter saying hold all information, meaning don't destroy anything because we want to know who did this and we may take further legal action. The archives are doing an internal investigation. And having worked for the government myself at different times, both as in the Navy, I was a helicopter pilot and a Russian policy officer, I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I was a federal prosecutor. So having worked for the government, all this information should be trackable and traceable on your federal computers, and they're not personal computers, et cetera. So yes, they should be able to determine who pulled these records. I think they already know some information about who went and got my social from the VA. So yes, they should be able to find all of this out. The question is, will they? And Jack Ciattarelli should be held accountable here, or at least hold himself accountable and come forward to say, this shame on me. Some people on my team did this. I should have put a stop to it. And I'm telling you right now, this won't happen again. And I've ordered it all destroyed. I don't know who has now access to these records, that kind of thing. So it is really, I think, to me, should be raising red flags across the electorate to say, look, we know Trump treats personal information callously. We know Elon Musk and Doge have released a bunch of Social Security information that I hear about. A lot of my seniors are very concerned. I'm concerned for them. And now we see that as governor, that's exactly the type of thing Jack Ciattarelli would do.
We've watched as the Republican Party under Trump has sought to weaponize any private information, any information whatsoever, against anybody who they perceive as their political enemies. In what kind of way, for folks who are watching this right now, they're like, okay, how can this impact me though? In what kind of way can this cavalier, can the cavalier behavior with regard to personally identifying information be weaponized against regular folks in New Jersey?
So we see the weaponization of the government at every level. And we know here in New Jersey that this is sort of an old time, tried and true tactic of Donald Trump. He went bankrupt, I think, about 4 times in Atlantic City, leaving a bunch of small businesses and others holding the bag. Some businesses who'd been in business for decades went under during those times. And then when he wouldn't pay you, many people would say, you've got to pay us. We have a contract, you have to pay us. And he would threaten to take them to court. And then people would sometimes make the calculation, and Trump knew they would, gosh, I'd have to spend this much money on a lawyer and court fees, et cetera. I guess I'll just eat this. Or they would go up against him and they would, be put out of business. So yeah, Trump has utilized the court and other things to bully people. And now we see him at the federal level having the entire U.S. government at his behest, doing things like saying to Bondi, look, indict Comey. And when everyone came forward and said, we don't really have a reason to, he said, just indict him. We see it when here in New Jersey, we have Alina Habba as our U.S. attorney. And she has already investigated the governor, the attorney general. She's brought charges against a sitting member of Congress. She tried to bring charges against the mayor of our largest city, but he, the evidence was that he was innocent. So again and again, we see the weaponization here from the Trump administration and federal officials on the ground. And we know that Jack's doing this, and it's so dangerous. My Social Security number's out there. I'm worried that my credit, people are, so then I was told, well, freeze your credit. And I said, well, what is that going to do? Well, you can't open anything. I can't open a new line of credit. I can't open a credit card. I couldn't open a bank. I couldn't, make big purchases. So you're really threatening people with a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of difficulties throughout their life. And I guess the reason I'm fighting this so hard is A, because I'm disgusted, of course, but B, because I'm a sitting member of Congress. I can fight this. Imagine the veteran who decides to write an op-ed against Jack Ciattarelli and what he might do to that person with these resources. And my service, I haven't been in the military in a while. When I was in the military, I wasn't married. I didn't have children. Imagine if all your children's data is in there. And then I was talking to another veteran because, of course, with all of these things happening, with all of the weaponization of the government against everyday people, most of us as military members have a lot of secure information. We have tons of data that they hold because we had a lot of security clearances. So in order to get the highest level of security clearances, which I held, top secret, SCI, secret code word, compartmentalized, I held that security clearance. And to get that, you have investigators like going back, talking to your childhood friends, talking to neighbors, talking to your parents, talking to family members. It's real, going through all of your records and compiling all of the information. And then, you often take lie detection tests, et cetera. So imagine if those are breached now. It's just, it really, this is, when we serve, we assume that the federal government is going to hold our information in trust because we're willing to die for this country. But to see it callously disseminated
Right.
is really, really offensive. And like I said, some of our, I can fight it. I'm not sure everybody would have that capability.
Right, right. The appetite or the resources. And it's not alarmist either because, look, we are 8 months into this administration and already we're at the point where Trump is checking off boxes on his enemies list. Appointed his own U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia to go after Letitia James. His own U.S. attorney wouldn't do that because there was no basis to do so. So he fired him, put a new U.S. attorney in who would be perfectly willing to do that, and immediately got an indictment of James Comey. And so this is Trump working his way down his enemies list right now. It's not just his political opponents in these prosecutions. He's sued Simon & Schuster, New York Times, 60 Minutes, ABC News. He's going after law firms. He's going after universities, going after comedians, Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert. And so if there's any doubt about the extent to which he is going as fast as he can to attack any political opponent, if we're 8 months in and he's already going after comedians, what does it mean, to your exact point, the next time somebody wants to write an op-ed or just appear on NewJersey.com or whatever it may be, talk on the radio, Z100 on the radio, and just have their opinions be known that are critical of this administration? This is what the descent into autocracy looks like. This is how it plays out in real time. It doesn't just happen one day. We are witnessing the steps that one would take if we were scientifically engineering a country that is descending into an autocratic state. This is what it looks like. To that point, what does it say that if Jack Ciattarelli is willing to be a partner? I mean, I say this as a figurative, but in reality, this is what it would be: a partner in crime to Trump here on this particular issue, even with something so sensitive as just disseminating your private information. What would that mean for the people of New Jersey more broadly, for whom Donald Trump is not exactly the most popular figure in the world?
So, Jack Ciattarelli has said that he can think of nothing he disagrees with Trump about. He said it's his job to support the president. He said if it was his delegation, he would have them all vote for the rescission package, the one big, beautiful bill, which is harming people across the state. And yet he just goes around town, says he's a Jersey guy, acts as if, he'll say anything to anybody in the state to get a vote. And much of it will contradict other things he said. He puts out stuff like he has a plan where he's going to cut costs by 40%, but if you cut the budget by 40%, but if you actually trace all the promises he's made, it actually adds 8% to the budget. So none of it makes sense. But he just goes around on this charm offensive. And I think in this moment, I'm just saying to people, he's told you who he is. Now I think you see who he is. So now I think you better believe who he is. Because if you don't, you're putting yourself, you're putting your personal information, you're putting your rights, your freedoms, you're putting your cost of living, you're putting everything on the table. Because we're not only witnessing a huge attack on a democratic form of government and a slide, or a rapid run into autocracy, what we're also witnessing is an incredibly corrupt administration that is using the entire market of the United States as leverage so Donald Trump can enrich himself and his family. And by that, I mean, he told the UAE that they couldn't sell, that we wouldn't trade tech with them until they put tons of money into his crypto account and his crypto company. And then a couple months later, he lifted all those tech regulations. So this tariff program, in many cases, is a big extortion racket.
Yeah.
And so if you have a governor, you have a choice here in New Jersey. And we're one of only two states that actually has a choice right now. The only statewide are New Jersey and Virginia. And so New Jersey has a choice. I have committed, and I have a long history of, standing up to anybody including members of my own party, when it comes to fighting for the people of New Jersey. I tell people, we had a saying in the Navy, it was shipmate, self. Yourself, individually, you always came last. It was always the mission, your shipmates, etc. And so I've demonstrated that throughout my career, and I will always put the people of New Jersey first, and I will fight tooth and nail for them. Or we have Jack Ciattarelli, who has said the person he's fighting for is Trump, and then he's gone after anybody who disagrees with him. And I think this is just really the most egregious way he's done that.
Well, I would highly recommend for everybody who's watching right now, do not look away from this race and the race in Virginia. I mean, these are the bellwethers that determine whether or not Democrats or Republicans have the momentum as we head into 2026. So if you live in New Jersey, if you have friends or family like I do who live in New Jersey, this is my home state. I was born and grew up in New Jersey. So highly recommend for everybody who's watching right now, pay attention to this race. If you have the ability to contribute, I'm going to put the link to Mikey Sherrill's website right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. If you're listening on the podcast, it'll be in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking the time today, and best of luck in the campaign trail.
Well, thank you so much. And yes, thank you for putting that link in. It's MikeySherrill.com. If you can contribute, if you can canvas, if you can phone bank or text bank, please do. And I really sincerely appreciate all the help.